George Lucas Jr. was born on May 14, 1944, to George Walton Lucas Sr. and Dorothy Lucas. He grew up surrounded by a loving family, 2 older sisters, Anne and Kate, a younger sister, Wendy, as well as a community of close-knit friends. Modesto was a typical American town. George was raised on a small house on Ramona Avenue. On any given day, you could find George running along the alley behind the house playing with childhood friends. An imaginative child, George used his creativity to do many things that showed his talents and gifts at an early age. When he wasn't creating elaborate Lincoln log cities and landscapes for his train set, he was thinking up new ways to entertain the neighborhood, with backyard carnivals, haunted houses rigged with special effects, or child-sized roller coasters. A visionary, collaborator, and innovator from the start, George learned that anything was possible if you could imagine it. As a boy, George read histories, biographies, and National Geographic magazine. His 2 favorite pastimes were comics and adventure serials like The Whistler and The Shadow on the radio.
Shadow knows.
He was a student of the comic books. He just loved them, Prince Valiant. I mean, you go through all the things that were series, that's what he loved. I mean, my dad knew the owner of Nichols News really well. So as a result, he used to get all the comic books after they tore the cover off, the old comic books. And so we'd have on my front porch a stack like this all the time of them. So, George would take them or he'd just sit on our porch and read them all the time.
When his best friend John Plummer got the first TV in the neighborhood, George spent every hour he could sitting on a bleacher in his friend's garage, watching non-stop action cliffhangers, which would all later help shape his own well-known blockbuster films. Even at an early age, George showed an aptitude for writing stories. George visited Disneyland on the second day after its opening, and from that day on, he eagerly anticipated family trips to the Magic Kingdom. Many of the attractions in the theme park helped spark George's imagination. George's continued love of Disneyland only grew stronger through the years, and fueled his desire to design crowd-pleasing rides and attractions for the theme park based on his Star Wars and Indiana Jones films. George attended Roosevelt Junior High School and then Downey High School, home of the Knights. While in high school, his family moved from Ramona Avenue to a 14-acre walnut ranch on the outskirts of town. It was at this ranch where George developed his love for photography and rock and roll. The music was new and exciting. To a 15-year-old boy stuck on a ranch, it sounded like freedom. In 1960, George got his first car, a Fiat Bianchina. It was a life-changing moment. No longer confined to the ranch, he changed his style and started cruising the popular 10th and 11th Street Loop with friends while listening to rock and roll, the primary inspiration for American Graffiti. It was at this time, too, George began to race autocross as a member of the Acuri AWOL car club. He modified his tiny Bianchina until he made it fly, beginning his lifelong love affair with speed both off and on the screen. You could always find George at the races at venues like Laguna Seca, where he worked as a member of the pit crew. Suddenly, on June 12, 1962, everything changed. Days before his graduation, George was in a terrible car accident. Heading home, about to turn left toward his house at the corner of Sylvan and Rexford, another student, traveling at high speed, broadsided Lucas's small Fiat.
Oh, that was awful. I remember driving out and looking at the tree and everything. I said, "Oh, my gosh, this is really bad." Went to the hospital, when he recovered, and bought him a racing car helmet that we had taped and glued a roller skate to on the top, just to kind of bring some levity to a horrible situation, because his lung was punctured. I mean, it was really awful. When you looked at it, was a jet seatbelt he had in there, and it literally, military jet seatbelt, it literally popped it. I mean, that's how bad the impact was. And so we spent then, actually it was the Foreign Car Service then ended up in the hospital for 3 or 4 days, coming over all the time that his family wasn't there. So we made fun out of it, as much as we could.
After a long hospital stay and months of recuperation time, George recovered with a new outlook on life. Being given this second chance, George decided he needed to do something meaningful with his life. So he enrolled in Modesto Junior College, where he soon became fascinated with anthropology, interests that would forever inform his storytelling style. George still loved going to the racetrack, but he now preferred to be behind the lens of a camera. While photographing cars at the track, George met Haskell Wexler, a well-known and widely respected Hollywood cinematographer who was also into the racing scene.
That's what got George and I together once, because we love cars and also cameras.
Impressed with George's camera work, Haskell recommended that George apply to the School of Cinematic Arts at the University of Southern California.
He had that cameraman's look in his eye, and so I got to meet him, talk to him, and I happen to know the heads of the small cinema school at USC.
USC provided George with a new type of freedom, much different than more rigid academic learning, which George had always found boring. While at school, George made several award-winning short films that pushed the boundaries of storytelling and style, most notably THX 1138, 4EB.
I know.
This edgy, futuristic story of a prisoner escaping from a vast complex was only one of his groundbreaking films that focused on freedom as a theme.
You know, he's the one that made it become an entertainment-oriented film school. He fought cats and dogs with them. I can remember, there were times that he thought he was going to get thrown out just because of the fact that he fought him. When he made Thex, basically he was going to use color film come hell or high water, and the professor said, "No, you are not." And he did. And part of it was they were, at the time, the school was more egalitarian. And, because you had all these military people, they couldn't afford to do anything like that. But, George didn't want to be a technical person, even though he became the genius of film technology. He didn't want to be just a cameraman. He wanted to do more. And so that's why he was different, and that's why you didn't see him as much there. Because he was working, he would do something for 36 hours straight, just nonstop. And so, you wouldn't see him. He would be in the, out filming or in the labs or whatever. And they also had limits on how much you could pay to rent a camera, and he didn't want to pay attention to that, because he wanted to do something.
During his time at USC and in the years following, George befriended many like-minded people who shared a passion for making films. One of these people was Francis Ford Coppola. With Coppola as partner and executive producer, George transformed his award-winning student film THX 1138 into a feature. American Graffiti, his second feature, followed soon after in 1973.